To even begin with Greg Abbott. For starters, this personification of Jim Crow is actively doing everything he can to keep the path to the ballot box as narrow and as white as possible, as Texas lawmakers are trying to pass a piece of legislation that's one of the worst voter suppression bills in the country.
$10,000. That's how much money people in Texas can now win in court by successfully suing anyone who helps a woman get an abortion after 6 weeks. That would include a doctor who performs it, a person who helps pay for it, even someone who drives a woman to an abortion clinic. That is all now legal in Texas.
And while much of the country is calling for and supports stricter gun safety legislation, Texas lawmakers are taking the opposite approach, focused on solving gun freedoms. Republican Governor Greg Abbott will sign a constitutional carry bill cleared by the Texas House and Senate this week that would allow most adults over 21 to carry handguns without a permit, without a background check, and without any training. It's the latest evidence of how far to the far, far, far fringy right the state's leaders are, pushing a bill out of step with the majority of Texans, including many Republicans, as well as law enforcement in a state with a very recent history of mass shootings.
You know me, I'm a gun owner. It's what's really immensely troubling is that as Texas is actually moving towards becoming more purple, more moderate, sort of more in sort of the mainstream of states and less red, the leaders of the state are actually going in the exact opposite direction. They're getting more culturally, more socially conservative. Just think of what they've done in the last 4 weeks. They put restrictions in place on voting rights, immense restrictions in place on voting rights that they're finalizing the final bill on. They are only allowing women to get an abortion after 6 weeks. So most women who don't even know they're pregnant, you can no longer get it. You no longer have that choice in Texas. That was put into law. And now this crazy permitless handgun where you not only do you no longer have to have a permit, you no longer get a background check, and you no longer get training, all of which was in place in order for you to do this. Now that anybody can walk into a coffee shop, a hardware store, a grocery store with a handgun on their hip. But it's absolutely crazy. We've had multiple shootings in Texas, multiple death shootings, mass shootings in Texas, in a Walmart in El Paso, in a church in South Texas, multiple shootings over the last few years. And we're actually going in the opposite directions. We think it's more reasonable to put restrictions on voting than it is to put any restrictions on Texans' ability to carry a gun. It's just ludicrous. I think ultimately, politically, it'll catch up to the Republicans, but right now it's so insane, and it would be laughable insane if it wasn't so dangerous.
America was built by and for the white Christian people of this nation.
There are 154 prosecutions of voter fraud in the past 17 years in Texas. Out of 94 million votes cast, the likelihood of voter fraud in Texas is less than any one of us being struck by lightning.
That was Texas State Representative Diego Bernal, one of the Texas Democrats who testified today in front of Congress about the danger of his state's Republican-backed voting restriction law. The delegation of Texas Democrats has been in Washington for weeks now after fleeing their state to postpone a vote passing the restrictive bill and to push Congress to act on federal voting rights legislation.
Fight over transgender rights. And once again, the epicenter is Texas. Governor Greg Abbott and State Attorney General Ken Paxton have directed state agencies to conduct investigations of families when they provide gender-affirming medical care for transgender children. Abbott and Paxton went so far as to say that this care should be categorized as child abuse.